Warmachine and the Iron Kingdoms is dead. And yet, Warmachine and the Iron Kingdoms are getting new beginner-friendly products and expanded distribution back into your local game store. This is the first teaser picture of new models released this year that isn't just a 3D render of concept art. But they were not created or painted by the creator and 25-year owner, Privateer Press. That's right, today we have Schrödinger's Wargame. It is both 100% dead as a dodo, but also possibly more alive than it's ever been. In this video, I want to tell you the news and quickly break down what we can expect from Warmachine and its new owners, as I guess what it could all mean for the Iron Kingdoms going forwards. You can only judge a horse by the races it's run, as they say, and what's to stop the new owners from turning it into a board game and never touching it again. Created 25 years ago by Privateer Press and, yesterday, sold to Steamforged Games. From its height a decade ago, where Warmachine was second in line to the throne of the wargaming crown, second only to 40k itself by the way, down to the lows of 3 years ago, where the player base was just about non-existent and half the dev team had left to form Atomic Mass Games. The entirety of the Iron Kingdoms IP has been sold. Warmachine, all of their old board games, the RPG, the Skirmish Company of Iron, everything that is Iron Kingdoms is no longer controlled by its creators, Privateer Press. Their paint line, by the way, P3, is sold as well to Steamforged Games, which, by the way, is an absolutely great line of paints, and if I actually use real paint, like that wasn't Games Workshop Contrast or Army Painter speed paints, it would 100% be P3 all the way. I wouldn't use any other paint, yeah. Privateer Press retaining core development team members and continuing North American distribution. By the way, they still exist as a company. But we also know that some people have been let go, or at least are not making the transfer, which is always a shame, and I hope they manage to make the most out of an uncertain situation. As far as we know, the 3 lead developers from Privateer will continue to work on the game. For, however long that contract lasts, we don't know, but presumably the product design and sales model will be dictated by Steamforged Games, SFG, allowing the rules writers to simply write rules. This sort of design is always collaborative, but for example, we know that at Games Workshop, the miniatures designers just design cool stuff, and rules writers get told to deal with it, and hopefully you can make a game out of whatever we think's cool. Quick aside, by the way, if you're a subscriber to my channel, I'd like to give you a big double hello. Well, the wholesomeness knows no bounds on my channel, so if you want to benefit from that reciprocal wholesomeness, like, subscribe, and leave a comment right now. For the comment, whisper soothing words into my ears because I really don't want to see the Iron Kingdoms IP go away. So yes, all of Privateer Press goes to Steamforged Games, both in terms of IP and facilities and staff. Except Monster Apocalypse, which is no doubt in Kickstarter limbo after the collapse of Mythic, and Level 7, but I, like everyone else in the world, know nothing about that. Mark IV was doing a great job of bringing the IP back to life. From all accounts that we've heard, whether insider rumour or anecdotes, Mark IV was beginning to pick up steam. Forged? The app downloads were growing, which is a good indicator, and the amount of demand was greater than production capability. Now that's a huge problem for the continued growth of the game, but a good problem for reality compared to expectations. For a small company, at some point someone had to run the numbers, and they figured out how many units they had to sell to stay alive, and they were selling above those numbers because they could produce so that they would not starve. Cool. But clearly, production was pushed to its limit, struggling to restock old sold out items and release new stuff at the same time. Because for a miniatures game to be successful, you have to release new stuff and keep that hype train rolling. With such large financial and temporal buy-ins required for miniature gaming, faction identity is huge. You need to excite people with lots of options so they can put the fantasy in their head onto the table. The more product you put out, the more likely it is you'll hit on what the players crave. But also keep everything in stock always for the same reason, because new players need that full catalogue to draw from. Faction identity is massive. And there's a lot of chatter about kind of Privateer Press here legacy negative issues when it comes to retail stores stocking Warmachine stuff, because it used to be a huge game that rivaled GW as mentioned, so lots of stores wanted lots of stock, but then as it died off, the product didn't sell and a lot of stores lost money on excess stock they couldn't shift, and it's a very different economy now in the miniatures market to what it was back then. Also, lots of rumours swirling about having been trying to sell the company for years and a bunch of unfounded stuff that I have no idea beyond random online muttering, so I won't talk about, but there was always an air of negativity from ex-employees or bitter people, basically. Then we have the new champions, of course, Steamforged Games, a company name that genuinely sounds like it was named specifically for Warmachine, which has a very steampunk aesthetic. Well, under certain versions of steampunk, diesel punk, it's all magitech really, but whatever you want to call it, right? Steamforged Games is known to me for three things, and I'll only be talking about my experience with them: Guild Ball, God Tier, and computer game IP board game Kickstarters, like Dark Souls, Horizon Zero Dawn, Sea of Thieves, Monster Hunter, Resident Evil. Guild Ball, first, is a divisive issue, and no doubt someone in the comments will be mentioning it. A few years ago, SFG ended support for the game because it was too competitive and the players would only purchase models that would allow them to win the game, not models that just looked cool, which led to infinite power creep and other such things. Very competitive scene with a rule set that was tight enough, with zero randomness basically, that a good player could always win, which tends to push out new players. This made a lot of people unhappy because people are always unhappy when a company decides to end their game. Even though we all understand the reasoning, which is, this game is not profitable for us to continue, is a valid reason. It sucks to end up there, obviously. And you could argue, computer game IP board games are a thing. They sell really well on Kickstarter. I have no real interest in them, but it's 100% what has made the company what it is. People like IP they know. Lots of Horizon, Monster Hunter and Dark Souls fans. Without this stuff, none of the rest of the company would exist. They might even genuinely be good, I don't know though I haven't played them. I would play Horizon or Monster Hunter, but no interest in Dark Souls personally, cool. Then we have God Tier. I have a bunch of God Tier, both starter sets and extra champions. I painted my guys up in what I call Board Game Plus. Due to it being hex based and miniatures based, it has a natural comparison to Underworlds, for example, but your list building comes in the different champions you can run together instead of the cards you take, which personally works for me better. I think it's probably the better game. I think it's a really good version of the game that it wants to be, and the reason it's such a small game is because it doesn't easily fit into mini wargaming or regular board games. It's tried to be a hybrid that blends collectability with long-term play, and looking at other entries in that market, like Underworld or Judgment and other many other things, boss battlers are a big one. That doesn't seem to be a thing people want, even though this does a great job with the pre-assembled and coloured minis, so it is literally pick up and play for the board game crowd. I think it's good. I think this market just doesn't actually exist at the moment, which is very odd to say, or at least not to the scope companies want it to exist to be as big as marketing think it should be, which I agree with. The fact this genre isn't massive is very confusing for me personally. In a Reddit AMA with Matt, the Chief Creative Officer of Steamforged Games, don't know what that is exactly, but let's move on. The focus was on getting existing Warmachine into Steamforged Games distribution and production channels. And the next 6 months of Cricks and then Signar Trenches, as laid out by Privateer Press, are all still happening just as if nothing has changed. Lastly, Steamforged Games and Warmachine. For the last year, their staff have been actively playing and running Warmachine tournaments in Manchester. They're doing this because they enjoy playing games. It's what they do. They haven't bought this to instantly squeeze out a board game and forget the IP. The Warmachine IP isn't an instant draw, it's a foundation. There is no point to sell the house before at least trying to build it. It's also, we have this short trailer. Now this isn't much, it's a simple graphic you can knock together in After Effects in like 10 minutes, okay? And some unreleased models. Privateer had not done a simple video. Also, for the whole of this year, 6 months now, they hadn't done a cool looking minis shot like this. They mainly did 3D renders, concept art. So even this is a step up in marketing terms. Also, minor side note, I absolutely love the paint job here. I accept that non-metallic metals are very in right now and take skill to do that I will never have, frankly. But visually it made the models super hard to tell what they were and how they really looked. This nice clean style is exactly how I would want my models painted. Absolutely beautiful. So we've had better marketing and the promise of beginner buy-in products and fitting into their more expansive distribution chain from Steamforged Games. That is who Steamforged Games are to my knowledge, and the only things they've actually publicly said so far. Cool. Said and done. So here's a list of my questions and or speculation. I absolutely love the Iron Kingdoms IP and I want to see it flourish because although the aesthetic is quite common in computer games, I really don't see it on the tabletop much, and that is sad. I am very biased in this note. So, Warmachine getting bigger is good, and I certainly hope that doing the occasional video about it can help it to grow. I'm 100% on their side, I'm very biased. Let's discuss. Steamforged Games doesn't work with 3D printed models much. They use a type of soft plastic you'd expect from board game pieces. Now, I will note that these are high-end, very good versions of board game minis. They're the same thing you get from Simon or Ravaged Star. I actually really like this current trend from companies. I think the models hold enough detail for my personal tastes and are robust enough for play and get delivered in cool looking packaging so that they look great on the local game store shelf. Minor note, but I actually really like all of SFG's graphic design. They've made some really eye-catching stuff for me personally. So it's not completely crazy to expect SFG to swap away from 3D printed models that Warmachine currently is and instead turn everything into injection molded soft plastic. In fact, I expect this to happen. However, their Guild Ball models have become print-on-demand 3D printed models that are printed by a UK 3D print house. So my actual guess is that everything currently existing for Warmachine 4 and the next Crix and Signar will all stay as POD, print-on-demand, 3D printing. But once production switches in, let's guess, the beginning of next year, it will swap to soft plastic. Minor note that might be great for 3D printers out there, because SFG has given out STLs, Steamforged Games have given out 3D printed files for their models before in a limited format. I don't 3D print, I'm happy to buy my models, but I know a lot of people like to print, so expect that coming in some format. I would assume at the very least a beginner product that is purely print and play. I would also guess that going forwards, magnets are out. I think swapping arms and heads is a great idea, but in practice very fiddly and apparently has a lot of legal issues due to magnets being unsuitable for children ages, so is actually quite restricting, weirdly. I imagine magnets are gone from now on. Steamforged Games does a lot of print media, both rulebooks, RPG books, and cards with stats and cardboard for their board games. I expect we will see stat cards and board games coming in the future. And continuing with the Iron Kingdoms Requiem RPG, presumably. In fact, they've said they're doing that. Personally, I absolutely adore my Mark III Forces of Warmachine books, and I would love to pick these up as collector pieces with all new updated lore and artwork for Mark IV. Faction books. Schedule of release is a big thing. For reference, SFG has a lot of different projects, and so it doesn't release regularly for a single project. That isn't how wargaming works, so we will see if they understand the need for constant drive. To that point, this is a new scale for the company. A full-size minigame is a different beast to anything else. A single release every 6 months, like they do for God Tier, simply won't cut it for a wargame, especially one that has recently removed a huge chunk of its range and so is currently running under capacity for player choice and faction loyalty options. Launching a new full-scale wargame is a daunting task, and yes, Warmachine might not be at its most robust right now, but it still has a built-in dedicated following with an expansive world and history all ready to go, the foundation for which they can build the house upon, as I referenced earlier. Metaphors. And from everything we know, Warmachine was growing, to be clear. App downloads were up. Product was selling out, which, yes, is bad for people getting to buy into the game, but is good from an expectation to reality ratio. This is an IP that has been tested and was successful, with its decline being in large part due to factors other than the IP and the concept itself. I personally want my Warmachine skirmish. When's that happening? Why isn't that the first thing? On the one hand, it's in line with the rest of SFG's offerings. They already have a lot of small model count game offerings, but on the other hand, They already have those, so why spend money on a new IP to do the same thing? Knowing businesses, it is impossible to say what their intentions are. The left hand rarely talks to the right hand, so are they trying to round out their skirmish gaming selections with a deeper list building game, or are they trying to expand into a new area of miniatures and geekery with a known but not super known IP, so they can still make of it what they want? Because if you had the funds coming in from Kickstarter board games as they do, why wouldn't you just add a huge war game to the stable? Until we see a roadmap and Steamforged Games' new product line intentions, there's no way of knowing what's happening. Now, they have said they're going to tell us that, to be clear. Later this week, I think they said, or within a week. They need to revamp packaging, and in aid of doing that, they will probably change material to what they do for all of the rest of their product lines. And then the question is, can they release new products fast enough and keep existing products in stock? If your mini wargame release schedule isn't described as punishing, you're doing it wrong. I guess one definite positive I can say is that SFG already has retail distribution in Europe to the extent that I have seen their product in regular people's stores. Game in the UK stocked Godtear at one point. I think I bought something from there once, and I assume currently stocks some of their board games. They probably have access to Waterstones, I would guess that's a bookshop, and I've seen their epic encounters, that's D&D scenarios with miniatures, in wargame shops as well as normie shops. That's pretty impressive. This is potentially the biggest thing to happen to Warmachine ever. Getting a wargame into regular shops could be a game changer, literally and metaphorically. Keeping the hobby requirement, but also allowing for the option of pick up and play at wargame size instead of board game size. Very exciting. Or we get a big push, it fails to work, and Warmachine takes a decade hiatus. Who knows? But if you made it to the end of the video, I'd like to give you a big triple hello. That was just for being cool. Bye.